Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 106. We just got back from the 2022 Martial Arts SuperShow brought to you by the Martial Arts Industry Association and Century Martial Arts. We had an amazing time, and this episode here tonight is to recap all of it, as well as take a trip down memory lane and talk about some Paul Mitchell stories and, of course, some Chris Rappold stories, because our guest tonight, as you can see, is the executive director of Team Paul Mitchell, the one and only Chris Rappold. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. And for our black belt audience that doesn't necessarily keep up with sport karate, go ahead and tell everybody who you are from your perspective.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Jackson. Always a pleasure to be with you, my friend. Hey, before I get into that, what was the episode that I was on? That was one of the first ones, right?
It was early on. It was when we were pre-recording them and then posting them up. While you do your intro, I'm going to look it up and find out the episode number. Go ahead and introduce
Yes, sir. So for the people that don't know me, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm from New England, and that's where the Paul Mitchell team was birthed. I was fortunate enough in those early years, I want to say it was 1988, that I had won the first two events of the year and had the number one ranking in the country. And Paul Mitchell picked me up as a competitor, a fighter. And I say good fortune, Jackson, because there's many, many great people out there, incredibly talented people, certainly at that time as well. But I really consider myself fortunate in that I was from New England, and I was, lived, 45 minutes from Coach, and, he had seen me grow up in the Crane New England circuit. So we had that familiarity. And then again, when I got the number one spot, and I had beaten a couple of the Paul Mitchell team members at the time in that first year, I was picked up, I think, to the end of the first year. And I've had the good fortune of being on it for all that, for coming up on 35 years. I guess one of the things that's maybe a little bit different from me, I think I'm the only Paul Mitchell member. I competed, on the NASCA circuit, the NBL circuit, and then I won 2 WACA world titles, and then I retired for 12 years, and I didn't compete in a single event. And then, call it maybe a midlife crisis or something like that, I decided to come back and compete again. And hey, look at Alex. And I think I'm the only player to take that length of a hiatus off from competition, come back, and then I was able to win 3 more world titles and compete all over the country and form friendships with team members that were children, when I had my first stint. And then at the end of 2011, after I won my final WACA World Championship, I retired, and that's when I was put on the executive committee and named executive director, and have been doing that ever since. So 10 or 12 years now. Yes, sir.
What an amazing story. And talk about a hiatus. There's also been a hiatus in having you on the podcast, because I looked it up, episode 17. It was you as well as Julie Sowald and Kalina Nordgarden on the show, which was an awesome show, by the way. I know it was back. I mean, we didn't have any graphics. I was just barely throwing this thing together. But When we finish up this episode, anybody that's interested, go on the YouTube channel, and you can go to the Jackson Rudolph podcast on YouTube. You can scroll down. Episode 17 is the last time that you were on the show. So you are well overdue to be back on the show. And what an incredible story. And I want to go through some little pieces of that real quick, just because it catches my interest.
Sure.
So you were picked up literally the season that the team was formed. The team was formed, and then you were picked up in year 1, as you said. So were you the first addition to the team beyond the core, or how were they recruiting players back then 35 years ago?
Yeah, I would really yield to Coach Rodriguez or Steve Babcock, of course, the two co-founders of our team, to give you the exact chronology. The original Paul Mitchell team came out of a defunct Spider brand team. So they had a core group of primarily fighters, but some people did forms as well. And then my recollection, it was like the end of the of year one, going into that year. It might have been at the end of year one or going into that year two, that I was picked up. And again, just so fortunate, whatever it was, I'd yield to what coach's memory is. That was my memory, but yeah, just very fortunate.
Awesome. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting was you said that in that year you had beat some of the Paul Mitchell team members. And it's so funny because even today I preach that to my students, because I've got students that come to me all the time. Jackson, how do I get on the team? How do I get on the team?
Sure.
And, I always want Paul Mitchell to win, but I tell my students, if you want to wear those colors, beat the guys on Paul Mitchell. Like, that's how you prove that you're at that level, right? And really, that's the story of being on the team, is that we all push each other. We all try to beat each other to lift each other up. I'll let you speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate, again, to have good mentorship by my instructors, and then of course, and I don't remember it, but Steve Babcock says I competed against him and I beat him, and I swear to you I don't remember it, but he shared that I competed against David Collins and Mike Conroy, and I'm drawing a blank right now, but just about everybody. And and I had some success, and anyways, I was fortunate, right place, right time to be able to be picked up.
Very cool. So before we get into the Super Show, real quick, I wanted to highlight another comment here, because Philip Brumet says that we're
Hey, Philip.
Appreciate that. But no, now, in all seriousness, let's jump into Super Show, right? I'll start by just you give us your recap of the event. 3 days, 4 days, however long we were there, all kinds of fun. But tell us about Super Show from your point of view.
Yeah, I think it was just one day, Jackson, that lasted about 107 hours. First of all, without sounding like I'm being overly patronizing, I'm grateful to be in an industry that has the support of Century Martial Arts and the Martial Arts Industry Association, because it really takes someone to take the lead to bring what could be a very fractured industry together. They've been doing it now for 20 years, and in particular, coming out of a global pandemic. What organization has the ability to put up that kind of investment to take that gamble and to bring everybody together? So I think on a lot of levels, I think it was more people came up to me and we just shared the thought of how nice it is that we're just all together again. So many good friendships that of just people we haven't seen in quite some time. And, just a first-rate event, everything from that epic opening VIP experience in the club, all the way through the seminars and all of the trade show vendors that were there. It was fantastic. As a presenter, I had a 4:00 slot, and I figured I'd be talking to crickets at 4:00 because it starts at 9 in the morning, and I know as a seminar attendee by 4:00 I'm cooked. And my seminar was, we had to bring in more chairs. It oversold, and I am not saying that as accolades for myself. I think that was for all of the people that had the 4:00 slot. I think there was just so much enthusiasm. Everybody was just soaking it up, So as a speaker, it was amazing. As an attendee, I loved it. On the seminars that I got to audit, I thought it was excellent. So all around, so good. And to, for our first time team members to go there and to, it's like going to Disney World yourself is one thing, but then when you bring your children to Disney World and you see Disney World through their eyes, it's a whole nother level. And for our team members that have not been there before and just walk in and the like, it was amazing to share that experience with them.
For sure. And it was so cool. Alex, Haley, and Sam in particular, who it was their first time. Obviously, they had that experience. But even Jake hasn't been since he was like a teenager. And so Jake won this time. Even his eyes were open to like how cool of an event it is. And I'm going to brag on Mike Dillard for a second for that opening night party they did. Because typically, for those of you that are watching that have been to the Martial Arts Super Show before, they typically do like a formal opening ceremony with stage performances and everybody's in, like a theater, and that's how the opening ceremony goes. But this year, coming back from COVID, which by the way, felt like they didn't miss a beat. It was just like another normal Super Show. But they decided to do like an opening night VIP party that we were fortunate enough to be able to attend. And literally, Mike Dillard rented out the Omnia nightclub for like 3 or 4 hours, whatever it was. And it was just such a surreal, immersive experience. We got to sat in a little private booth, like right next to the stage, watching Cynthia Rothrock accept the Lifetime Achievement Award. Amazing. It was just so cool. Like you said, first-class experience all the way through. And to get that flavor of some new stuff, right? The one criticism that I've ever heard of Super Show from attendees that have been before is that we get too much of the same thing. And I think that they did an incredible job this year of bringing new life to the Super Show. More new speakers, new format for the opening ceremony, putting it in the nightclub. I thought they did an excellent job of evolving the Super Show. Any more comments on that for everyone?
Yeah, hats off to them. I just, for people that have not been in that Omnia club, which I had not been to, I mean, just the ceiling itself and that thing it did, just to see that was amazing. The generosity of Mr. Dillard to rent out that entire club for the martial arts community and invite everybody was absolutely amazing. And to be there to tribute somebody like a Cynthia Rothrock, who received the Lifetime Achievement Award, was very special. And it was also special to see the attendees that came out to see her, Grandmaster Ernie Reyes, Grandmaster Jeff Smith, Grandmaster Bill Wallace. It really was a who's who of legendary figures, even going back eras, and to be able to be there, next to all of those people was tremendous. As much as you and I, Coach Damon, are around those people, I still revere them as my seniors and am still in awe of what they've done because we started on their shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head. And now let's get into some of the highlights. So Team Paul Mitchell's primary responsibility there was running the booth, as I say on the show all the time, spreading the gospel of sport karate, right? Telling all these school owners that would come up who we are, what we do, what we're all about. A number of our team members booked seminars, private lessons over the course of the weekend. And then some of the most fun that the competitors had was getting to go out and perform for everybody. We had demos on both of the main days of the show. So I'm just going to go through a few highlight points and just get your reaction to it. And let's start with those Team Paul Mitchell demos.
Oh, look, I'm not going to talk about feelings, because of course anybody listening could say, well, Chris is biased because he's a part of Team Paul Mitchell, so of course he's going to say his people are great. Well, Haley Glass is the #1 forms and weapons female competitor on the planet Earth right now. That's not a feeling. That's not Chris saying she's my teammate and I want to talk her up. You're talking about somebody that just won the forms and weapons at the U.S. Open.
For the second year in a row.
Second year in a row. You're talking about Jake Presley, who won 3 overall grands at the U.S. Open 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So you're talking about seeing the best in the world. You got Sam Diaz representing the traditional division. Amazing. Alex Mencius, a Diamond Nationals winner, a ring winner, and then, hey, look, I got to throw a little I got to throw a little sun your way, my friend. You dabbled on that last day and came out. And of course, just for the listeners and for my own knowledge, so I know, Jackson, how many ISKA world champion, how many times have you won the U.S. Open?
You're going to make me talk about myself, Chris. Oh, man. Anyway, but 16. It's the most men's weapons titles at the U.S.
So, the only reason that I do bring that up, and I'll talk about you. I'm not going to talk about myself. So you just sit there and be quiet. But, I look at Paul Mitchell as we're in a unique position. Number one, I think we started on the shoulders of the Budweiser team and the Atlantic team, then to the Trans World team. So if anybody asked me, I think their inspiration birthed our team. That's the way that I look at it. And for all of those people that were involved in that team, I revere them. And that's my opinion. Maybe Coach would agree with that, maybe not. Well, when I look at the 35, coming up on 35 years that Team Paul Mitchell has been around, how many teams have been birthed as a result of the inspiration of the consistency of the team members over that 35 years? I mean, it's mind-blowing. And then when you take a look at the relationship between professional martial arts and sport karate, these were two worlds that I lived in, and I lived completely separate lives. And these people over here didn't talk to these people over here. And Paul Mitchell birthed the rejuvenation of these two power entities coming together. And there's such a source of pride that I feel about a humility about being part of it. It's certainly not about Chris Rappold. It's about it's about 35 years and 150 or so of the greatest sport martial artists of the past 35 years, that have all contributed to the legacy of our team. So I'm overjoyed. I really am. And to hear the way that people come up and talk to all of you guys and wanting your autographs and saying, my son and my daughter, their dream is to be on Paul Mitchell one day. They're so inspired by you guys. Or at the Super Show, so many of this audience of professional martial artists and their instructors and students, they've only seen a Haley Glass or a Jake Presley or a Jackson Rudolph or an Alex Mencius or a Sam Diaz on YouTube. They've never met you guys in person. And the excitement that Coach Damon and I got to witness as they looked at all of you was just, again, it's like taking my, daughters to Disney World and seeing it through their eyes. It was the coolest thing, So, yeah, I'm so proud because I want to see our sport grow, and I want to see teams birthed, and I want to see, teams grow and become better. Because, I take a pride in feeling like, we were a part of giving other people that opportunity or that inspiration to do that. And that's the way that I look at it. So it's a real treat.
And I couldn't agree more, the being able to see it through someone else's eyes. Because this was the first time that I'd had an opportunity to do that, because for years and years and years to come into Super Show, I went up there and performed with the team all the time. But this year I had the role reversal of being the MC for a couple of the demos and getting to talk about the accomplishments of our active competitors and being able to put them on a pedestal, and felt so much better than any time that I've ever gone out there and done anything, right? But to be able to show what we built and what the result of that 35 years of history has culminated in the athletes that we see today. because not only did the team draw inspiration from the teams before and now inspires teams that will come after as we continue to do our thing, but that's also true amongst the players, right? Because now the players on our team are players who were kids when they watched, me as an older teenager and then an adult, and my opponents like Reed and Cole Presley and Tyler Weaver, and we were all teammates. And then, before that, it was me and those guys watching your Kalmans and Matts and your Lauren Carneys and all these people. And it just shows how every generation of sport martial artists, their job is to inspire that next generation coming up. And it's so beautiful how within Team Paul Mitchell, we've been able to do that for each other. And to me, that's the most special thing that we've built, is how our champions of the past inspire our champions of today, and our champions of today will inspire the next group of Team Paul Mitchell champions a decade from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I for sports talk radio, sometimes I listen to it and I engage in it, and I'll hear about my beloved Patriots. Forgive me. And I'll hear the criticisms of Coach Belichick and how the Patriots aren't this, or, the haters out there, or, they're trying to find the faults and all of that kind of stuff. I don't look at it that way. I really, really don't. It's I like to see people do well. And, those things that you mentioned, those people from the different eras, it's a great kind of, entertaining exercise to say, well, who's better, who would you say is the best fighter to come out of Paul Mitchell, or who's the best forms competitor, and everybody's got their favorites, right? And if that person happens to be your favorite, awesome. Stylistically, I just, I love the way this person did that. That's why this person's my favorite. Great. But, when I was, before I got on Paul Mitchell, I remember seeing a very prominent fighter. I won't mention the name, but, a world champion at the time. And I remember hearing him, the fighters today, they're no good, and, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of made the promise to myself back then. I don't really care to engage in that. Do I have my fighters, my weapons and forms competitors that, I love the way she did that, or he did that, or that was so cool. But, the idea of, give me your, best whatever. I don't know. To me, it's almost like slighting somebody else, right? I mean, who's better, Larry Bird or Stephen Curry? Two absolutely amazingly gifted people that they kind of did the same, but they kind of, did differently. I mean, I think the only thing we could ever really say in sport is Tom Brady is the greatest football player of all time. But outside of that, everything else is up for debate.
Of course, the Patriots fan would say that. But anyway, I want to move on to some other Super Show highlights. Another huge one. This was a hit amongst the team because we grew up watching Master Ken's martial arts comedy videos. And I have to assume you've seen some of them in the past, right?
Yeah, only a couple hundred.
And we got to film an episode of Master Ken's Privates with Master Ken. So everybody stay tuned. I'm just going to give the audience here a little sneak peek. Essentially, Master Ken wanted to know what our Forms and Weapons team does. And so we showed him a little bit of what we do. And then he proceeds to tell us everything that we're doing wrong and how he could defend himself if Alex Mancias and Haley Glass and Sam Diaz and Jake Presley all attacked him at once. It is comedy gold. It is the greatest form of martial arts in Ameridote that has ever been practiced. So stay tuned to the Enter the Dojo Show YouTube channel for an upcoming episode of Master Ken's Privates featuring Team Paul Mitchell. So now that I've got that plug out of the way,
yeah,
Coach Chris, how funny is that, man?
It's hysterical. First of all, as you were all witness, Master Ken is an absolute master at what he does. His level of comedy, and his impromptu genius for how he puts that show together is without compare. I mean, he is a pro at what he does. When he's in that Master Ken mode, he will not break character. And I'm so excited, as a fan of his, and to see our players interact with them and to have the opportunity to be part of that. Come on, that's just the coolest thing ever, So I can't wait to see the finished product. I think it'll be really cool.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I can't wait either. He makes fun of us a little bit, but that's his job, right?
Of course.
That's one of the things that I think is great about our team is how our players, Sport Karate gets all kinds of hate on social media all the time, but we rise above it. We don't really care what the outside world says. And I think that us appearing on Master Ken's show and letting him make fun of us a little bit, I think that shows exactly that we're happy to stay in our lane. We're happy doing what we're the best in the world at, and it doesn't really matter what anybody else's opinion is, right? But now I want to pivot to the seminars, because the seminars, that is the reason we were all at the Super Show, right? Let's start with Coach Damon's. Did you have a chance to catch Coach Damon's seminar?
Not only did I catch Coach Damon's seminar, I was Coach Damon's Uki. And let me just say, I'm glad Coach Damon is on our side. So if I may, I'm just going to talk about him for a second.
Absolutely.
I have been in some I've been in some of the, world championship fights where you feel like the person is trying to kill you, but in the end, it's a game that we play. And I've been training in martial arts for coming up on 40 years. But you know what Coach Damon does is he puts it for the past 25 years, aside from doing what I've done in sport karate. He's taken it to a whole nother level than what I was able to do it. He's a heavyweight overall grand champion, world champion. I was a divisional world champion. He's in a different, as far as I'm concerned, he's in a different category from me. But nonetheless, 25 years in the Oakland Police Department, a person who has won every medal a police officer can win for putting his life on the line. I think it's extraordinary. For the people that haven't seen him on Real Sports with Brian Gumbel talking about, how the training that somebody goes through to be a police officer, and where the pivot needs to happen so that police officers can use a respectable level of force, through better training. He did a seminar that standing room only again, and just was so masterful at giving martial artists insight into how to provide education so that they can help the law enforcement in their communities. I think was fantastic. He probably stayed in that room another half hour answering questions after the seminar was over. And, he's a very imposing figure, of course, but the gentleness of his movement, the compassion of how he applies the force, and the care and attention that he gives the technique so it does not do it puts a person in a level of compliance without the necessity for injury, but also as a way of protecting the police officer. I think it's just so important. He shared something, Jackson, that police officers are only asked to do 4 hours of physical training a year. Can you imagine training only 4 hours in a year and competing in a tournament? Never mind, you train 4 hours a year, and now you're going out on the streets against resisting opponents, some that are carrying, knives and firearms and gangs, and it's crazy. So through the through the work of Henner and Huron Gracie, which Coach Damon works with. They're really making a big impact in helping to educate law enforcement, and I thought he did an excellent job showing it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And that's one of the things that's so cool about Coach Damon is that in the sport karate space, we all know him as the point fighting expert. And I think that anybody in the sport martial arts community, when they hear, oh, Damon taught a seminar at SuperShow, immediately is going to jump to the sport karate mindset. But what he does with law enforcement and the integration of martial arts into that and the training that he does for the Oakland Police Department in the martial arts, I mean, that is a whole other field that he is an expert in, that he has created such positive change in. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity here to kind of give him his flowers for being able to do that.
Yes, sir. And let me say something else about the people that don't know Coach Damon. Coach Damon has been on the front lines of dealing with riot situations and civil unrest and the most intense physical and mental situations, of overwhelming odds, where it's not you're going to get outpointed, where it's you could get killed. What sometimes people see is with Coach Damon from him coaching on the sidelines is his passion. That's surface. He on the inside he might be doing all of the surface things, but inside he's very cool and unshaken. Every once in a while, I might stand in front of him. Just I'm not trying to protect Coach Damon. I'm trying to protect the person that might misread Coach Damon and try to do something to him. I'm trying to save other people's lives. I'm not worried about Coach Damon losing his cool. When you stand on the front lines in riot gear with people throwing things and cursing you, and he can stay calm and straight-faced, it's amazing. And also too for the team members, can you ask for somebody better to be behind you, to have your back? Whether it's him when he and I would do team fighting together, or he was coaching me by the sidelines, there's nobody I'd rather have behind my back than him. And then listening to even, Sam Diaz or Haley talking about, I go out to perform and usually I can't hear anybody. I tune everybody out. And then all of a sudden I hear this thunderous voice come out. And you and I both know that man bleeds black and white. And it's a credit. He's a credit to the team, and he's one of my best friends in the world, and I'm proud to know him, and I'm proud of what he stands for. It's we're blessed. We're really, really blessed.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And now I'm going to make you talk about yourself again, because you taught a seminar too. I was able to sit in on that one. You had Alex and Haley and Jake all demoing up there. Mm-hmm. And yes, that means we got to see Haley and Jake do at least a little bit of point fighting drills. But no, in all seriousness, excellent seminar. The way that you break things down is incredible. Your teaching strategies are second to none. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell a little bit about your experience teaching, and then maybe just a key takeaway or two from the message that you were trying to share.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That coming from you, or coming from our team in particular, that means the world. Everybody was so complimentary. Some of the people have not heard me speak in that format before. I just think it's real important. I love martial arts, and in particular, I've devoted my life to sparring. I was not a performance martial artist like you, and I've just seen over the years too many people get turned off to sparring because it was taught incorrectly. They were force-fed content that was just above their experience level, and it put them in a situation where they were scared, and they just, that's just not for me. So really, the retention-based sparring program is just about creating a very structured content and contextually teaching it in a way so that it fits the audience that you're teaching. And if I can say if there's something that I'm, good at, that I think I've made some impact with the martial arts industry, I would say it's that. I've taken schools that did not have a sparring program, and we've implemented a sparring program, and now they have it. I've taken schools where they stopped doing sparring because there was too much either injury or just the students were getting discouraged, and we made these modifications, and now they're thriving. And then I've taught in some very competitive schools where that tournament competition is their focus, and shared some of the concepts, and it's made a difference as well. So in the lane that I've been called on by Martial Arts Industry Association to speak on, I'm happy to have a positive impact. And I want to say it's probably over 100 schools now, probably a little bit more than that actually, across the United States. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because I'm jumping, probably like 150 schools across the United States that are using, the program. And I'm super proud of that, because what that means, if there's 150 schools doing it, there's thousands of students I will never meet that are enjoying martial arts because it's just been calibrated to a way that they can enjoy it. Yeah. So it's kind of exciting.
That's awesome. I love that message. And I want to bring this back to the whole reason that Team Paul Mitchell is ever invited to Super Show in the first place goes back to years ago when Century became the official apparel sponsor of Team Paul Mitchell. You were instrumental and essential in making that happen, and you manage that relationship to this day. So for the viewers at home who may not know how all this works, and they've just always seen Century associated with Paul Mitchell as long as they've been in tune to it, tell us the origin story of that. How did Paul Mitchell and Century start working together?
Yeah, well, it was set, and I'll share a quick story, and then I'll spread a little bit of credit there. It was Century started to notice that people were pulling sparring from their program, and I think the way that they were measuring that is they were seeing a decrease in equipment sales. And after doing some inspection, they found that people were saying, this is my livelihood. I can't have 50% of my students going out feeling discouraged, and I can't have all of the injuries we're having. We're just not going to do sparring anymore because it's problematic. So they started to think about the issue, and they reached out to Hanshi Dave Kovar, and they were talking to him about it, and it was him, and he said, one of my friends, Chris Rappold, you may want to talk to him because that's his expertise, and he might have something to offer. So that first year, I was on a panel with Mr. Kovar, Chip Townsend, Mike Dillard, and people were firing questions at us, and it seemed like there was some resonance around the information that I was providing. At that same Super Show, I met with the president of Century at the time and Vice President David Wall. And, I was kind of introducing myself to them, and they knew who I was, and they knew about Team Paul Mitchell, the fact that I was the executive director. And, we sat down there for the first time, and that was the very first time that there was discussion about bringing these two worlds together. Is there something that we could do that would be bigger than what both of us were doing individually? And those conversations lasted probably a good 6 months, maybe 6 months to a year of working it and talking about it and formulating it. Sarah Fields, who was the president at the time, and David Wall, the vice president, they flew out to my school, and we sat down and they looked at our program and all of that kind of stuff, and we started talking the Paul Mitchell, deal, which was great. Now let me share the credit. That first year, I also Coach Gilbert. He flew out on his own dime to the Super Show, and helped me present and showed, I think, good faith. And then let me share additional credit both to yourself and Caitlin Deschelle, because both you two were being featured on ESPN. You striking my beloved Tom Brady with a bow staff. I'll hate you always for that. But I think all of those things helped, and you would have to ask Mr. Wall, but I think they helped to see, they helped to create the picture of influence that we might be able to bring to Century, and Century, of course, could bring to us. And, that's something I'm just super personally proud of, because at the time, there was no presence of Century at any tournaments, whatsoever. And, we were part of birthing that. And now when you go to a tournament, everybody's in Century uniforms and everybody's wearing Century gear. And one of our former team members, Laszlo, is working for Century Europe in Germany. And they're talking about, Century being an official equipment sponsor at the WACO World Championships. And you're seeing a huge presence of Century at the US Open, for the past few years. I don't know if all of that would have happened. Having John Paul DeJoria come and be a keynote speaker at the Super Show, and all of the performances our members have done. And again, I go back to it, the inspiration of birthing other teams to want to do some of the same things that we've done. It's just really exciting. That's what you want to do. You want to pass it on. You want to pay it forward, and you hope that your energy contributes to something even bigger beyond yourself. And I'm very proud of that, and very proud to be a part of that.
And I think you captured beautifully what is so important about the partnership is how much exposure it has gotten for Century within the sport karate community. Because you're exactly right. Before this ever happened, Century was not a major player in the sport karate space. And now they are the premier player in the sport karate space, because they can do the sparring gear, the C gear. I mean, I see top tier fighters that are sponsored by other companies wearing C gear gloves just because they prefer them at this point, right? And to see that evolution and what our players on Paul Mitchell have been able to do for that, because I got to give a lot of credit to guys like Justin Ortiz and Zoltan Laszlo for being around some of those super shows where they were trying to design the prototypes of those gloves and giving Century feedback on, this is how you make the right glove for a point fighter. And now the fact that we see point fighters wearing those gloves all the time, I think is the coolest thing in the world. And the same thing in the weapons department. I was talking to Paul Webb about when we did, Paul Webb's now the president of Century, for those of you tuning in. And we were talking about when I first came to Oklahoma, and we met about doing Signature Series bows. And he said one of the things that helped kind of change the way they thought about it was they said, well, Jackson, what do you want to know about the weapons we already have? And I asked, well, what wood do you make your bows out of? And that was just something that they had never considered. They were like, what do you mean, what wood do we make them out of wood? What do you mean, what wood? And I was like, well, and this is all stuff that I learned from Joe Greenhall, who now manufactures a lot of the weapons for Century. And, I talked about the difference between a poplar bow and an ash bow and the quality and the weight. And it was just a perspective they never gained. And now they produce weapons that we see all over sport karate tournaments. So it's really cool to see the evolution of Century within sport karate, and how much not only sport karate has done for Century, but even more so how much Century has done for sport karate. And while we're taking this trip down memory lane and talking about kind of the beginning of this partnership, it makes me think of other great memories with Team Paul Mitchell. And we were talking to some of the players this week, and, Vegas or Super Show sometimes kind of feels like the classic fun Paul Mitchell trips where we're going for a seminar, or we're just going for training. The big one that I was a part of, and I was blessed to be a part of, was going to the Cayman Islands, right? So tell us about, that's one of the things that sets Paul Mitchell apart from other teams. There aren't other teams that are going to the Cayman Islands just for fun, right? Of course, we taught a seminar and did some community outreach there and did some training. but we had a lot of fun too. So just tell us about, some of those experiences and maybe a story or two that you might want to share about, not necessarily Cayman's or Vegas, but any of those kind of classic Paul Mitchell trips.
Yeah, look, there's a few people in my life that have, really had a massive impact. And one of them I have to say has been John Paul DeJoria. I mean, I've been sponsored for 35 years. I was 19 years old, and I wasn't destitute or anything, but I was a college student. I remember, Mike Conroy saying, "Hey, come on, we're all heading out," and me saying, "Sorry, man, I got a big test coming up on Monday. You guys go. I'm staying in and studying." It reminded me of that when I saw Haley Glass in the halls, studying, doing her homework at the Super Show a little bit, But I remember the first time that Coach Steve brought me to John Paul's mansion in Rhode Island. And literally, I mean, I'm going there. This is a house that has 18 bedrooms, and I walk in and I'm standing on a $500,000 carpet, and we go out to his expansive lawn that overlooks the ocean, and there's judges and all of these high level people. And it, aside from name dropping, I think as a 19-year-old boy, I think what it did is it expanded my capacity for what was possible, because I got to see the example of somebody who was very passionate about creating a business that served the world in a in such a high level integrity based way. So that was a great one. Sometimes you hear people. One time we met John Paul at in New York, and we went to the plaza, and it's funny. Wow, I'm going to say this, but he called Ivana Trump. And to see if she was there, because she was, using the shampoo at the time, and they were friends. And hey, Lola, let me call Ivana and see if she'll come up and have lunch with us. And she wasn't around, but he took us to the plaza for lunch, and we took some iconic pictures that still hang in the hallways at Paul Mitchell. So when I think about that, going to the House of Blues, which he founded with Dan Aykroyd, and having a private party there to celebrate our 20th, that was pretty amazing. And yeah, I mean, there's just crazy things. Fighting, the event that I think put Paul Mitchell on the map was the 5-person team fight where we beat Trans World Oil. And I think that officially took us from the regional team that we were out of New England and put us on the national stage. And to go against and beat Terry Kramer, Richard Plowden, Anthony Price, Jeff Gears, and Tony Young, and beat them so decisively as we did, it was amazing. And to do it at the Palace of Auburn Hills, where the Detroit Pistons play. I mean, that's to have been on that team and be a part of that history and have that fight on ESPN at that time was amazing. And then most of the people that I just named ended up becoming Team Paul Mitchell members. It's extraordinary, the friendships that I have taken from the Paul Mitchell. The experience of being a team member have been awesome. I mean, Pedro Xavier and I, we go back to when I think I first fought Pedro when we were 15 years old. I was a white belt. He was a black belt. He threw a kick to my head, and I tried to rise and block it, and that didn't end too well. But you're talking about lifelong friendships. Mike Conroy, who these people are like they're family members to me. it's truly been a privilege. And like I said in the beginning, there's a lot of talented people out there. I am very proud of what I did in sport karate, but there are a lot of people that have certainly been worthy of the position. I really had right place, right time, luck on my side. That and a ton of hard work, by the way. But to be able to have some of those memories, to have been able to fight along some of the greatest in the world, um, to have the friendship that I had with our captain Kevin Thompson, particularly over the 8 years he was sick. His family is my family. That's just that one relationship will forever change who I am as a person. So, how do I quantify it all? I don't know. Yeah.
And that's something that's so special about this team is that so many of the members over the years have that same deeply rooted emotional connection to the team because of those relationships that were formed. And while we're on this topic and kind of deep diving into what it means to be on Paul Mitchell, and we talk about the history, I want to bring up something that's actually sparked some recent discussion in the social media forums and things of that nature, which is something that makes us very unique in the modern era of competition, is our coaching structure. The fact that we have an executive team and have since I joined as a competitor in 2012, I believe was the first season that we had the executive team assembled. And I've heard a lot of questions recently around what does that mean and how does it work? So peel back the curtain just a little bit. What is Paul Mitchell's executive team and how do all of the roles work within it? You know that I know, but for the people tuning in at home, a perspective that maybe they haven't heard before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, you're using the word, there's been some discussion. I think what you really mean, which by the way, I haven't heard up until some of our players shared it with me because I just don't really engage in that stuff. But there have been some criticisms put out by people that haven't had a corporately sponsored team for 35 years. And they're looking at our structure and they're saying, well, they're awfully heavily weighted on staff. Why do they need all those people? Well, it's because they're looking through it through the eyes of being one person controlling everything and not having the responsibilities that we have. So the way that we've operated for many years is there was a forms coach, a fighting coach, a tournament promoter and co-founder, and a former team member and co-founder, and myself as the executive director. And when you're dealing with representing $1 billion corporation and now representing $1 billion JPMS corporation and the largest uniform and equipment supplier in the world, there's a level of complexity and management and communication and relationship building and structure and recruiting and policy that a smaller team they would never even have to engage in. As I said to the players this week, just as my role as executive director, I've probably logged since January 50 hours of work just with my responsibilities. So again, I understand, but it's like me criticizing the UFC. Well, I've never run the UFC, so from the cheap seats of a person who runs a a martial art organization, and I'm talking about personal best. I'm not talking about Paul Mitchell. Yeah, I mean, I can have opinions about the UFC, but I have no clue because I don't understand that level of complexity. I think some of the voices that have been out there are nice people, but they just quite honestly don't know because they've never been a part of it. There's a lot of moving pieces to what we do, and it's it to do it the right way, to do it the professional way, and to represent billion-dollar companies with the standards that they expect from us, the accountability and the reporting standards. Yeah, it takes time. There's a lot to it.
For sure. And I think it's a new question for us to have to think about, because as players on the team, it always made sense. Like once you're in it and you're a part of it, you know there are certain things that first person I'm calling is Coach Chris. First person I'm calling for this is Coach Steve, Coach Damon, whoever it may be. Yep. And as a player, you understand the culture and you understand the inner workings. And you're right, it's just something that from the outside you wouldn't get it. But from the inside, and I think that if we polled our players about this, everybody would know exactly like, hey, if you have this problem, which coach do you call? And they're like, oh, easy, that one. You know what I mean? And so I think that is, and I hope that other teams get to experience things like this, because you're right, it's a testament to the development and the size and the prestige of the team that it needs that type of a unit to be the administrative unit.
Yes, sir. So, to give perhaps an analogy, and by the way, this is not to disparage any team out there. Hear me loud and clear, Jackson Rudolph, and anybody else that listens to this podcast. If you're running a sport martial arts team, I'm a fan. I want to see you do well, whether you believe that or not, because if your team does well, we're all going to do well. Step in the ring, compete against our guys, push our guys, beat our guys. Awesome. You know what? It helps all of us, but again, I don't want to say this in a disparaging way, but if you're running a pickup touch football team, one coach is fine. If you're running the New England Patriots, you have a head coach. You have an offensive coordinator. You have a defensive coordinator. You have an HR department. You have an accounting department. You have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How many? You have scouting coaches. It's an entire, and I'm not comparing ourselves certainly to the complexity of the Patriots or an NFL team, but I think some of the people that unfortunately voice criticism are talking about something that they just don't know, and their experiences with being part of a team that either didn't have a coach or had one person doing everything. And yeah, not when you're representing billion-dollar companies. You can't.
And I think that gives all the viewers a better perspective on like why Paul Mitchell is structured the way that it is. I've got two more questions for you before we get off of here. And one of them we've kind of alluded to here and there and touched on in stories about you as a competitor. But I wanted to make it very clear because I knew that we were going to talk a lot about SuperShow and a lot about you as the executive director and all these other hats that you wear. But you were a world champion competitor. You mentioned the fact 12-year hiatus, came back, won world championships after that. I want to give you an opportunity because I am big into making sure that the competitors of today understand the champions of yesterday and understand, to your point, the shoulders that they are now walking on, right? And so as much as you don't like to talk about yourself,
sure,
please talk a bit about being a competitor and maybe just a couple of your biggest favorite wins and some of those opponents you faced, and just tell us the Chris Rappold as a competitor.
Yeah, it's look, I'll tell my story through the story of the people that I've competed with and against. I was a teammate of Pedro Xavier, who is, by many, I think in most people's mind, even if they're critical, I would say probably top 3 ever, to be part of that initial team that dethroned Trans World Oil. But then, you take a look at myself and Pedro and John Payton, who won the Waco World Championship. You take a look at myself, Richard Plowden, and Pedro that won the Diamond Nationals, the 3-person team. It's been amazing. I got something on you. I think I got something on you. I won the overall at the U.S. Capitol Classics, and I got that fancy schmancy the trophy that everybody loves. What is it? The
pyramid. I got one pyramid.
Oh, you got which one of our team members didn't have it and was jealous?
I think what's funny is that it was Jake. So they brought it back. They didn't have it for years and years and years. They brought it back for 1 year in 2019. Hopefully, Grandmaster Brown is bringing it back for 2022 because that's going to be the first Cap Classics that we've had in 3 years. But anyway, so they brought it back, and I was able to get mine that year. But then Jake did not win because his teammate now, Alex Mancias, got it in weapons that year. So Alex has a pyramid. I have a pyramid.
And I have a pyramid. Yeah. But
Jake doesn't come up short on much. So.
Oh, my goodness. I think he's won enough. But, one of my biggest wins was the first world championship that I won. And I was coached by, Coach Don Rodriguez, and Richard Plowden was in my corner because he was Paul Mitchell at the time. And I fought a gentleman named Lajos Hugetz, who was the winningest European fighter of that decade. He was from Hungary, by the way. Laszlo and Zolt knew of him. He was continuous world champion, multi-time, point world champion, multi-time. And I fought him in a 5-round fight. He knocked me out cold 5 seconds into round 1. I went in to blitz him. He leaned away and hook kicked me. And I'm telling you, like, my guard was up here, and he still hit me in the temple, knocked me out. They revived me with smelling salts. Of course, this was before concussion protocols were in place. And God bless Richard Plowden and Coach and Ted. But they revived me, and our fight went 6 rounds, and I beat him in overtime 27-25, 27 points to 25. And this is 1 point for every technique. And I beat him for the Waco Pro World title. I mean, that would have to go down as one of, my biggest wins of all time, even though it was, my first. Coming back after 12 years and then going to the World Championships and winning it was something very special as well. So, I've had a lot of great ones. But honestly, for me, Jackson, it's the people that I competed alongside. I was a teammate of Alex Lane. I was a teammate of Damon Gilbert. I fought side by side. I would win. Kevin would win seniors lightweight. I'd win seniors heavyweight, and then he'd bow out to me, and I'd go into the grand. So I fought with Kevin Thompson. I fought with Pedro Xavier. When you look at the who's who, and then as far as teams, you're talking about. I competed against the Atlantic team, the Trans World team. Force One team. I competed against my good friend Hector Santiago's team, Metro All Stars. I mean, we had wars. Just so many. So many teams that just don't even exist anymore. And then going all the way up to competing against Mike Conroy's teams, Full Circle. I competed against them. I coached against them. So I feel like, I've been blessed. I really, really have been blessed. I've been blessed with great teammates and, but like some of the new players were asking me, like, what's your favorite memory? Honestly, coolest things in the world to me were like what we did the other night where we were sitting around and we were just trading stories. and I see them, wide-eyed listening to stories of, things that have, we did in the past, and to know that they're going to do that too. It's a legacy, and to be a part of that. So many teams don't get to enjoy that. There have been some teams that have been created just within the, past couple of years. I hope they make it to 35 years. I'm a fan. I hope they continue to win and improve and do that, because then we all win. But to be a part of the dynasty of Paul Mitchell, to wear the black and white, if somebody pinned me down and said, "What's your biggest accomplishment in sport karate?" Being a part of the team, and then to have the opportunity to lead the team as the executive team allows me to do is, the honor of a lifetime.
Beautifully said once again, and thank you for sharing that perspective of your history, because again, I think, and this is something that for the audience, I'm going to do this more and more consistently, is have not only the champions of today on the show, because we do that all the time, but have the champions of yesteryear come and talk about what it was like back then, because I have found that there's way too many young martial artists that don't know the names of the sport karate competitors that they should know. And speaking of those young martial artists, Chris, there's a ton of them that watch this show, and the vast majority of them dream of one day doing exactly what you said and representing the black and white. It should be the dream of any young sport martial arts competitor. That was my dream, and it's the dream of so many. So you're the executive director. You are one of the coaches of the team. You are one of the people who helps make these decisions about who gets to wear the black and white. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to scouting and when it comes to young competitors that are trying to earn that spot, what is it that you personally look for, and what advice do you have to those competitors?
Yeah, well, I'll answer it by, talking about people like Alex Lane, who is, one of our winningest fighters of all time. Zolt Murati, our probably winningest fighter, Damon Gilbert, all of these legendary figures, they're winning their divisions. You have to have the goods, you have to have the skills. You have to be able to deal with the wins with humility, and the losses with humility. We're not going to pick you up until we see how you win and we see how you handle loss. That's huge. You have to have the skills, but then the next thing that we will always look at is, as a representative of the brands that we represent, what do we owe our sponsors as far as the quality of the individual? Are they well spoken? Does the way they act inspire the next generation of people looking at them? I've been part of decisions where we've passed on some amazingly talented people, not because they weren't awesome, but because they weren't the total package. There was some kind of, whether they were a bad sport or, the way they treated people, it wasn't good. That stuff counts. It counts big time. And as we look at that, it's a combination of those things. I mean, we vet our players very, very carefully, and all the credit in the world to Coach Steven and Coach Don, who did it for so many years, by themselves, and did such a wonderful job, over so many years. But it's a very, very careful process. And the other thing that I would encourage everybody to do is, if they want to be a part of our team, they have to be able to show a level of professionalism, which means if you want to be part of our team, send us your resume, express your interest and your desire, have a conversation with our coaching staff, take those proactive steps, because that's going to count for a lot too. The way that you engage with us gives us insight into the professionalism you will have as a member of this team. There have been people that we've gone out and we've soft talked to, hey, if you have a chance, put together a resume and send it to us if you're interested. Oh yeah, I'd love to do that. No follow up. Doesn't matter how many tournaments you've won, you're crossed off the list, because if you cannot just do that one thing, then that's problematic. So it's really looking at the character and the integrity. It's what would your biggest rival say about you? If they'd say, you know what, do I want to beat that person? Absolutely. But you know what? Really, really good person, top competitor. Yeah, that's probably the kind of person that we're looking at. And then, of course, we want to all, sport karate. We're a smaller sport, so there is some interplay between all of the teams out there. But if somebody has that desire, it's important for them to come to us, because we want to be as respectful as possible to all of the teams out there. And we hope in turn that, the teams out there are, respectful to us as well.
Again, I know I've said this a few times in this show, but beautifully spoken. And I love the idea of, what would your biggest rival say about you? I think that perfectly speaks to everything that we look for with Team Paul Mitchell and trying to look for new players. It's, are you not only someone who wins and who wants to be beaten by those rivals, but who those rivals respect for the way that you carried yourself both in and out of the ring? I think that is a perfect summary of it. And I love what you said about come talk to the coaches. The Paul Mitchell coaches are not untouchable and unapproachable. You can come up and talk. Like, come talk to me about my experience. Come talk to Coach Chris. Like, this is, and I feel like there was this perception in my generation. Like, there was a time where I was terrified to go talk to Steve Babcock. You know what I mean? And then now, of course, I've been on Steve's boat and we're great friends. And, he was a groomsman at my wedding, right? So, it's my message to everybody is that approach us. Exactly what Coach Chris said. Like, say hello, let us know who you are. And again, if Paul Mitchell never knows that you're interested, then there might never be the opportunity, right? So let the people who need to know about that interest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because somebody could be very good out there, but we don't know what their intentions are. So truly, unless they come to us and say, no, listen, my dream is to be on Paul Mitchell. I'm looking at the next 2 to 3 years or whatever. But if we don't know that, we don't know. And then the other thing that I would say is, as you interact with the coaches and the players, just the only thing I would ever ask is, just do it. Don't do it when our players are about to compete, because we heard that a little bit this weekend. They're in the zone, as they should be as athletes. I'm not going to go up to, a professional whatever player and talk to them right before they're performing, or talk to their coach right when they're getting ready to go in the ring. But there's plenty of downtime. Lord knows there's plenty of downtime at a tournament where we're all just sitting around, or one of us. And yeah, absolutely. One thing you have to be, if you're going to be on Team Paul Mitchell, you got to love martial arts, and you got to love martial artists. And I love talking shop with people that are enthusiastic about what has been a passion in my life. So I welcome those conversations, Yes.
Awesome. Well, Coach Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show tonight. This has been an incredible episode, Super Show recap all the way through these amazing stories about Team Paul Mitchell. For those of you tuning in, thank you so much for your support. I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. One more huge thank you to Century Martial Arts and the Martial Arts Industry Association for putting together yet another incredible Martial Arts Super Show. And huge thank you to Black Belt Magazine for everything that they did at Martial Arts Super Show, and for hosting the Jackson Rudolph podcast. This has been episode 106. Thank you all so much once again for tuning in. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.